Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to episode number 96 of Paul Heyman's TNA, and we're coming off the back of Victory Road, which was a huge night for a number of reasons, none more so than Kurt Angle, after 15 months, losing the World Heavyweight Championship to the man who we see make his entrance to open the show, Bryan Danielson. The American Dragon talks about his victory, puts over the reign of Kurt Angle. He held that belt longer than anybody has ever before. He talks about a new era in TNA, the era of American Dragon. Coming out from the back, Steve Corino, the spokesperson of the New Age of Honor, makes his way to the ring and approaches the champion, reminding him where he comes from, continuing to develop this TNA versus Ring of Honor storyline, and he suggests that with the TNA title in his possession, it's the perfect moment for Bryan to come home to ROH. Bryan doesn't look too interested in this proposition, but before he can respond, the Ring of Honor World Champion AJ Styles comes out from the back and he warns Bryan not to even think about it. This obviously gets Danielson's back up. Even if he wasn't interested, being told not to do something is always going to have that reaction. And Bryan suggests, while he's not linked with Ring of Honor at the minute, that he is interested in maybe taking AJ's World Championship from him so he can be the Ring of Honor and TNA champion and prove that he is truly the best wrestler in the world. As the two men go face to face, Mr. Anderson appears on the screen and calls for calm. He tells Bryan that before he can think about anything else adding another title, he has to think about his first title defense of the championship that matters most here in TNA, his World Heavyweight title, and that first defense is tonight. Mr. Anderson won't say who the opponent of Bryan Danielson will be, but the best wrestler in the world should be ready for anybody. It's a solid segment to open the show, not fantastic and not the best way to kick off a new title reign. Everybody holds their own, improvising well, and it's a good way to open the show. As we then go into, it's not a lull, but a match that will feature good action, as in 11 minutes and 20, Frankie Kazarian and Christopher Daniels defeat the All Night Express, Kazarian pinning Rhett Titus with a fade to black. But this is one of those matches I like to do where there's no doubt that you're getting a good match, but at the same time it gives the commentators a bit of a chance to unpack what happened at the pay-per-view as well. Plenty of time in there to recap and to promote what is coming later in tonight's show. But it's a decent match and decent performances from everybody. Bad Influence, one half of the Forefathers stand tall in the ring, celebrate their win, and it's pretty straightforward in that regard really. We then get a promo in the back with the Kings of Wrestling, and they are furious at the events of Victory Road. Chris Hero says that they may have beaten them again on Sunday, but the Kings aren't done with the Icon and the Enigma. Walking in from the side, David Richards and Eddie Edwards, the American Wolves, have something to add of their own. They tell the Kings of Wrestling, in fact, they are done with Jeff Hardy and Sting, and it's their turn to take the back seat. The TNA World Tag Team Championships are coming to the New Age of Honor, but the Wolves are the ones bringing them back. There is a brief moment of tension between the two sides as this promo breaks down into more of an argument, but Jimmy Jacobs comes between them, keeps things calm. He's saying that it doesn't matter who takes the titles from them, all that matters is that the titles get taken from Jeff Hardy and Sting and come back to their group. Couple of people improvising well there, Eddie not doing too well, and it's an average middle of the road segment. We then go to the office of Paul Heyman. Obviously that is currently occupied by Mr. Anderson and Matt Morgan. And Morgan's asking Anderson about this World Heavyweight Championship match. He's not heard anything about that. But then again, he hasn't been in contact with Paul Heyman tonight. Mr. Anderson says that Heyman was very clear to him about this main event, but even he isn't sure who Bryan will be facing. Anderson has been told that it will be revealed just before the match. Anderson then asks Morgan to go and speak to the beautiful people in DNR because we've got a match between Brooke and ODB up next, and he wants to make sure that none of those four women get involved. As Matt Morgan leaves, we see Mr. Anderson's phone begins to ring. The caller ID shows that it is Paul Heyman trying to get into contact with Mr. Anderson, but Anderson rejects the call. When we see that he's rejected the call, we also see a number of missed calls from Paul Heyman, so clearly something going on here, as Mr. Anderson then decides to switch his phone off entirely, throws it to the side, so it looks a little bit like perhaps Mr. Anderson has gone rogue tonight and isn't quite following Paul Heyman's orders to the T. We then get that match that we spoke about. It's not very good, and we see there actually it's because these are both classed as unimportant. A sign that I've not booked ODB very well, to be fair. This turn of Brooke on ODB, I do think can allow us to bring ODB back up to that mid-card level at least. I don't think she's ever going to be competing at the top of the Knockouts division again, but I think she's an interesting, unique character, and this win hopefully builds us some momentum. I don't know if the fact that the crowd are interested means that can't happen. While we do cool the crowd in terms of this storyline, it is good to see ODB picking up a dominant, decisive win. While Matt Morgan did manage to keep the 4 women from getting involved during the match, the beautiful people quickly arrive after it in order to try and attack ODB. They're not happy to see her standing tall whatsoever. With Brooke still down, the 2-on-1 attack is thwarted by Daphne and Roxy. DNR clearing the ring of the Knockouts Tag Team Champions and making it clear to Love and Sky that they want those titles. And after Roxy and Daphne both pinned Velvet Sky within the space of 24 hours last week, one on Evolve, one at Victory Road, you'd have to say they have a very, very good claim to potentially taking that title shot. Desmond Wolfe is then interviewed by Jeremy Borash, who asks him about the one-night tournament on Evolve, which will see the winner of a 4-man eliminator named as the number 1 contender to his Evolve championship. Jay Lethal will face Shelton Benjamin, Loki will face Magnus. Those are the 2 first-round matches, determined by the fact that they were the 4 men who in July picked up singles victories on the show. Wolf thinks that it's a great idea, particularly to see victories rewarded, and anybody who loves high-level professional wrestling would be crazy not to tune in on Saturday. Desmond says that he'll be at ringside with JB throughout the night to witness the action, and yeah, he can't wait to see who his next challenger is. Above anything else, he's happy that whoever comes out on top at the end of that night will have earned this shot. There'll be no questions about that. And maybe it'll teach Jay Lethal a lesson. Win, lose or draw, Lethal needs to know that you don't just demand title shots, you earn them. Before the third match of the night, we get a recap about how this match came to be. Last week, Aries and Samoa Joe were with CM Punk as they attacked Colt Cabana and Jerry Lynn in the back. Maro and Taz point out that despite CM Punk's long-term friendship with Colt Cabana, the Saviour has quickly shown he has no issues putting personal relationships aside when it comes to fighting for Ring of Honor against TNA. Colt Cabana is an example of that. Paul Heyman, who he said he once trusted more than anybody in the business, is an example of that. So Punk has a mission and he doesn't care what friendships and what relationships are ruined in the process of that. We will hear from Punk later tonight. But Austin Aries, he doesn't have an easy time of it by any means. 11 minutes and 25 and it's a back and forth match. But he does defeat Colt Cabana decisively and cleanly with a brainbuster. He's had a couple of bad results. The loss at Slammiversary to AJ and then losing again at Victory Road. Unable to regain his championship. But a win tonight maybe offsets that a little bit. He has his arm raised, but we do put over that he had to dig deep to keep Colt Cabana down. Cabana's not somebody we've pushed a lot in terms of having a lot of wins, but in terms of the personality, the fact we know he's so entertaining, he's a really valuable member of the roster, so we don't want him to come across as a complete jobber, taking out his frustrations at losing to AJ Styles once again. The former ROH World Champion has some more disrespectful words for Cabana after the match. We don't hear what he's saying, but his body language makes it clear that he's throwing some kind of insults at him. Aries then heads up the ramp to end the first hour. The commentator's putting over that CM Punk will be out next after this break, laying down his demands to Paul Heyman and to TNA Wrestling. And it's a good segment from Punk here. An 83 I'm happy with, but I suppose when I was bringing him in, I had this idea that he'd bring show levels up automatically. I think in 2011, he'd been a big part of WWE television, but I suppose he'd not really taken off to that next level like he did in reality. But he comes down to the ring and of course he's going to be one of the strong points of every show. He takes a microphone and he tells viewers that he's here to make his demands. That's what it's been billed as. That's what it's been promoted as throughout the night. And he's not surprised that Maro and Taz have tried to present this as if he's going to come out with some outrageous expectations. But why not? He's going to humour all the people who think that he's in this for himself. TNA are desperate to bring him under control because they know the influence that he has and how unpredictable and chaotic he can make the situation. What does CM Punk want? Maybe he could demand a tour bus or a private jet. Maybe he could come out and demand A-list treatment and get everything that he desires. Or he could demand full control of Ring of Honor and make TNA give back what they stole. But it's really not that complicated. Punk's demands are simple. There can be no progress within this situation that benefits TNA without one thing happening. CM Punk looks down the camera lens and he's straight to the point. Paul Heyman needs to grow some balls and show his face, or things are going to get a whole lot worse for TNA Wrestling. So the idea with this segment is we build it up as we're going to get what CM Punk wants, but what he really wants, and it's a moment that I think is going to be huge when we build to it, as we build to it, I should say, CM Punk and Paul Heyman face to face in the ring. And as much as, of course, we want to build to matches with CM Punk, I think the idea of building to that segment is just as big. The man in charge of TNA and the man who he went into business with when buying Ring of Honor in CM Punk, and that's going to be where we do lay down the marker of what Ring of Honor want and what has to happen for this war to come to an end. So another building segment there. The Motor City Machine Guns then defeat Creed and Dutt. It's pretty short. It's a decisive win for Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, but I think that even in 7 minutes we could get a really good match out of these two. A 63 is decent. Austin Creed not quite at the level of the others, but two good performances from Sabin and Shelley, which is nice to see. After the match, they don't get much time to celebrate as the Kings of Wrestling come out from the back looking for revenge for the involvement of Motor City Machine Guns in their defeat at Victory Road. Really, they were just neutralising the American Wolves, but the Kings aren't happy about that. Following them out, the Wolves then grab Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli, and it looks like there may be a follow-up from their tension earlier. Quickly, however, it becomes clear that the differences are behind them as they descend onto the ring together. The four of them coming for the Motor City Machine Guns. Surrounded by those, MCMG set themselves up for a fight against the odds. When Jeff Hardy and Sting come out from the back, the World Tag Team Champions ensure that there's no chance of the New Age of Honor using the numbers game as they so often do. The Kings and the Wolves decide to back down as they see the World Tag Team Champions and Sabin and Shelley. This follows up on the interaction from the pay-per-view with Jeff Hardy and Sting shaking hands with the Motor City Machine Gun, once again thanking them for what they did in terms of ensuring that they weren't cheated out of the belts. We then get an interview with Bryan Danielson. JB should be on screen, but doesn't matter. He's asked about, it's not a very good segment either, he's asked about the World Heavyweight Championship defense he has scheduled for tonight. JB asks that with Kurt Angle not here tonight, but set to appear on Saturday's TNA Evolve, does Bryan have any idea who his opponent may be? Danielson says that he has no clue, and he's not sure he feels this is the way a World Championship should be defended. It should be earned, it shouldn't be given to a random name, but that's not something he can do anything about. Bryan says that he's ready for whoever he has to face in tonight's main event, and he's confident he can beat anybody inside the six-sided ring. JB follows up with a question about Danielson's condition. After Sunday's grueling match with Angle, there's no way he can be 100%, but Bryan says that he didn't expect to be. He knew that there would be aches and pains coming into Thursday's Impact, but he was never going to back down from a challenge. Everyone knows what he went through at Victory Road, but he insists he's got more than enough left in the tank to defend his championship tonight. We then get more follow-up from the Wolves and the Kings of Wrestling, with James Storm and Robert Roode confronting the two teams. They're not happy. As the argument continues, WGTT then arrive on the screen, and I forgot to put Shelton on screen here, so obviously at this point of booking the show I was being a little bit absent-minded. The argument escalates to the next level. All 8 men look ready to come to blows, but are kept apart by members of the behind-the-scenes crew, so nothing too serious, but we're just showing here how vibrant the tag team scene is. WGTT, Wolves, Kings of Wrestling, Beer Money, Motor City Machine Guns, Sting and Jeff Hardy, so many teams, and we're clearly going to have to try and sort something out in terms of the next challengers to the title. Madison Rayne then defeats Rosita in a decent match. I did this rated on iCandy, and with a 78 from Madison Rayne, you can see why I did that. It's a 61 rated match, didn't have much drama and poor flow. Not too bothered about that, as the two women do have great chemistry, and we give the crowd breather. Good wrestling and decent reaction, so happy with that match as Madison Rayne wins in 7 minutes and 10 seconds. She then stands tall, having followed up her monumental victory over Awesome Kong, albeit cheating to do so. She gets another win, as her arm is raised. The Queen of the Mountain gestures around her waist. It's clear that having put down Awesome Kong, finally, she has her sights set on Mickie James's Knockouts Championship, as the commentators look to promote Saturday's Evolve before the upcoming main event. Sarah Del Rey comes out. She picks up the spare headset at the desk of Maro and Taz, and she says that she can already see what is happening. Madison Rayne is not getting a title shot, and neither is anybody else. Del Rey isn't going to let anybody muscle in on her rematch again, especially after what we saw with Alyssa Flash last month. Sara Del Rey makes it clear she is taking her rematch at the next possible opportunity. She isn't waiting until hard justice. She wants it next week on Impact. Because the waters have got muddied as they did last month again, Madison Rayne's going to push for this title shot. She just wants to get this out of the way. The Queen of Wrestling then throws the headset down and storms to the back. It looks like we're going to get a Knockouts Championship match on next week's Impact. We then get the entrance of Bryan Danielson for the main event, and Mr. Anderson appears on the screen. He hypes up the challenger for the World Heavyweight Championship as Matt Morgan comes in and asks Anderson what's going on. He's holding his phone. He's been speaking to Paul Heyman. He wants an explanation, but Mr. Anderson points to the camera, telling Morgan that he's recording something. Mr. Anderson says that he's a busy man with a lot to deal with, so he's going to let Bryan's opponent introduce himself. Mr. Anderson then points to the entranceway below the big screen. He disappears, but we see that Mr. Anderson comes out from the back. Obviously, that was pre-recorded, as Mr. Anderson then summons down the overhead microphone and introduces himself as the challenger for the World Heavyweight Championship. Anderson says that he was sick of waiting for Paul Heyman to honour their agreement, so he's taking things into his own hands. Paul Heyman made a promise to him when he agreed to help out this company, and he knows that Paul Heyman's promises aren't worth the paper that they're written on, so he's sorting this for himself. TNA needs a champion whose loyalty can be trusted, and Anderson is going to give these people that tonight by beating Ring of Honor legend Bryan Danielson. So not only has Mr. Anderson gone rogue and he's no longer following Paul Heyman's direction, he's also trying to make people question Bryan Danielson. He's justifying himself trying to steal the championship by saying that Bryan Danielson's a Ring of Honor guy and we can't trust him to hold the championship. Nonetheless, Mr. Anderson is defeated by Bryan Danielson, and there is a reason for that. Mr. Anderson's contract's coming up. He wanted more money than I was willing to give him and has been offered a better deal elsewhere. I think he's going to either All Japan or Pro Wrestling Noah. The point being, Mr. Anderson will be gone in a couple of weeks. So if anybody's thinking that this was felt rushed or a bit haphazard, seemingly we were building something a little bit longer term with Mr. Anderson, and then it just happens the night after Bryan wins the belt. Unfortunately, that is because we don't have Mr. Anderson for much longer. He's somebody who I've not used the best, I'll admit, and I'm not heartbroken that he's not going to be here, but at the same time it is a little bit disappointing to have a storyline thrown off like that. He didn't really fit in after those first few months, I'd say. Tonight we use him to just further put over our World Heavyweight Champion. Bryan Danielson makes the first defense, making Anderson tap out to the label lock in 13:38. A good performance from Bryan, advancing the storyline, getting the crowd buzzing. Can't complain there, as Bryan stands tall, having picked up the victory and made his first defense, as we said. Question marks over the role of Mr. Anderson going forward, of course, are going to remain, with more pressure now added to Paul Heyman to appear. He was called out by CM Punk earlier, and now this situation with Mr. Anderson, he simply has to act now. Whether you think he was justified in taking that time off after he was attacked by Bobby Lashley, you'd have to admit now that the pressure is just too much. Paul Heyman has to show his face and has to do it soon. With that said, the focus at the end of the show has to remain with the title holder himself, the American Dragon, raising the World Heavyweight Championship high in the air. Just 4 nights after that grueling match with Kurt Angle, he decisively defeats Mr. Anderson in a really good main event. Mauro and Taz putting him over as Impact closes, and we really wanted to put across how explosive next week's episode is now going to be. This controversy with Anderson and Bryan, CM Punk calling out Paul Heyman, what is going to happen? It's a very good episode to follow up the pay-per-view. Really happy with that, and very happy to see us increase our popularity in 22 regions. Evolve now also has to deliver, so let's go into that and cross our fingers that it gets at least a 71 rating. Otherwise, we could be looking at the end of Evolve on MTV. And the show begins with Desmond Wolfe joining commentary for the night's action. He puts over the 4 men involved tonight and reiterates what he said on Impact. He is looking forward to a great night of incredible wrestling action. We get a solid opener with Shelton Benjamin defeating Jay Lethal in 14 minutes and 20 with a pay dirt. During the match, Maria tries to bring in a steel chair. We've seen that as a little bit of a signature since Jay Lethal's heel turn, but Desmond Wolfe leaves the announced position, so it didn't take long, just 14 minutes into the show or whatever, and he's already been called into action. He takes the chair away. Lethal's incensed by this, takes his eye off the ball, and Shelton Benjamin defeats him. A good opening match though, makes me pretty confident that we're going to have a strong main event too. Decent performance from Jay Lethal. This is in order to continue his storyline with Desmond Wolfe. Long-term plans we have for Jay Lethal, so despite him losing this early into his heel turn, I'm not too bothered. He shoves Shelton Benjamin after the match. He's a very, very bitter loser and confronts Wolfe, but Wolfe tells him to take a hike. He's out of the one-night tournament. He's got no business being here. Magnus is then defeated in 1 minute and 40 by a furious Low-Ki, screwed out of the X Division Championship at 2 back-to-back pay-per-views, and he takes it out on Magnus. Again, this isn't a great look for Magnus, but at the same time, sometimes having a quick squash match, and the idea here is to shock people. We want to make Low-Ki look as strong as possible here, and it happens to be that he kind of catches Magnus off guard. He's not fully prepared for the onslaught that comes to him, and Low-Ki stands tall after the match, still furious about what's gone down, but ready for our main event. We then get Kurt Angle's first address to the audience since Victory Road. This was the draw of this episode in a way, I suppose, if you wanted to see the number 1 contendership tournament, but we wanted to say on Thursday, if you want to hear from Kurt Angle, you've got to watch Evolve 2, because like I've said, we do need to put a little bit more emphasis on what goes down on Evolve, rather than it just being a kind of B show. He addresses the defeat, puts over Bryan Danielson, talks about how proud he is of his title reign. Just because he's lost it doesn't mean he can't win it back. That's his intention at Hard Justice. He also talks about what Mr. Anderson did, condemning him for basically booking himself in a World Championship match, and applies that pressure to Paul Heyman. So it is really reaching a fever pitch here. It is going to be impossible for Heyman to ignore it, as Punk, Bryan, Angle, all these people will be desperate to see Paul Heyman address what is going on at the moment. We then get Mickie James speaking to Jeremy Borash. She confirms she will defend her title against Sara Del Rey. She has no issues with that rematch taking place. And in the main event, it's a really good match actually. I saw the red notes first and was a little bit worried, but we get the crowd buzzing as Low-Ki and Shelton Benjamin go out to steal the show. There's a 20-minute time limit on this match, and we come just short of that. So Shelton Benjamin had been in a 14-minute match, remember, Low-Ki in just a 2-minute match. I thought about doing this as a 20-minute time limit, but I thought in a way that's a bad look on Low-Ki. If he's wrestled for 2 minutes, Shelton's wrestled a competitive match for 14 minutes and then they draw. So I thought that we'd have Shelton Benjamin take him to the limit. There's no shame in him losing to Low-Ki in 19 minutes to a Warrior's way, especially when Low-Ki was so much fresher going into the match. And after the match, Desmond Wolfe leaves commentary to join Low-Ki in the ring. The two go face to face, and we know that in the future, I was probably going to do it next week, but I don't want to confirm that just yet, but we know that Low-Ki and Desmond Wolfe will be going one-on-one, and I'm pretty confident that that'll be an incredible match. No danger whatsoever about this episode not reaching the required level. A 77 is really good, and I'm delighted with that follow-up to Victory Road. Again, it was more about laying seeds of things that are going to come in the future. I think that we've done a very good job of that. Bryan picking up a big win, which is only going to make him even more popular. The Amazon is staying with the company. I was going to let her go, but obviously Dixie has seen something in her that I maybe don't. A few things for me to deal with there, but we do see another solid rating for Impact, so happy with that. No complaints whatsoever. And like I said, that's the fallout to Victory Road, the build to Hard Justice, another huge pay-per-view, and hopefully you'll join me next week. And it's only a couple of months now until the biggest show of the year, Bound for Glory 2011. Big plans for that, and big things coming every single week going forward.